Rahina Begum. I am an artist and illustrator by profession, and I'm also the co-director and founder of a human rights organisation called Restless Beings. I'm British Bangladeshi. I grew up in East London in Manor Park, and that's pretty much where I guess everything started, you know, my teenage years. I went to a local girls' school, all-girls school called Plashett School, and fundamentally I think a lot of who I am now kind of harks back to that period in my life. Aside from that, it was just an everyday East London growing up kind of life, watching Manor Park change over the years. We went from one fried chicken shop to 10 by the end of the time I finished school. So that's pretty much the highlight of my life during those years. So secondary school, I think is just, you know, it's adulthood kind of, it's the last thing on your mind, and it's just trying to figure things out. And that initial stage of anyone's life. So for me, going to a secondary school in East London was just a really happy blur, and that was it. Life started to change when I went to sixth form. So I went to Seven Kings sixth form, and I think that's when I would say my own personal kind of progression. So it was actually really realizing what I want to do. And I think that came to me at quite an early stage. Most people kind of finish university and they're still trying to figure out what they want to do. I had a clear idea of kind of where I wanted to go. I didn't have a career in mind at all, actually. It was just more about what I really enjoyed and what really mattered to me. And it was figuring out a way to be able to do that. So titles, career roles were not that important. So at Seven Kings sixth form, I studied A-level art, I did media studies, English literature, all the creative subjects that I actually enjoyed. And I think I was quite aloof at that point. And it was about just momentary enjoyment. It was about what I was really good at. I don't think I was aware that academically I would be any use, basically. I thought, right, okay, I enjoy these subjects, I'm going to try my best. I did really well, alhamdulillah. At the end of Seven Kings sixth form, I applied to major institutes and then decided to change my mind. I got into Oxford University and then changed my mind and backtracked and then thought, right, is this really what I want to do? And I made some ridiculous choices at the age of 18, which was the syllabus didn't match what I wanted to study in English literature because it didn't have enough linguistics. And off the back of that, I decided to switch universities and went from Oxford universities to a regular London School University. So I went to Westminster, I studied literature, linguistics and theory. And the only reason why I went and studied that subject was because it had linguistics in it, and it had a subject called phonetics. And I found it compelling to find out how people said things the way they said and the kind of sounds that you made with your tongue. And that was just my favorite subject, and I really got into it. And somehow university life was just, you know, it was wonderful to be able to again do what I enjoyed. But naturally growing up, you have, you know, sort of family pressure, you have your peer pressure as well. It's just kind of, what do you want to do? What are you doing with your life? You know, you're just studying subjects that you really enjoy, but fundamentally you're thinking about your future. And in all honesty, I wasn't. I was just enjoying the subjects that I really enjoyed. I went on to do a master's in post-colonial theory and literature and history in UCL. And again, it was on a whim. I enjoyed post-colonial history. I wanted to know what happened to South Asian countries and Southeast Asian countries after the British left, and how women, especially women, female poets, were trying to re-identify with their own culture after the British Empire had left. Again, on a whim, a subject that I did just simply because I enjoyed it. And that was pretty much me growing up. As soon as I graduated at UCL, I got headhunted for a job which for me seemed a bit ridiculous at the time. It was to be a research associate for a university that I had no desire to work in. It was miles away from home. For me, family, friends, being in London was everything at that time. A 21-year-old that loved their city, you know, just to be away from home didn't make any sense. So I was looking for something closer to home, and then I eventually got a job at SOAS University. So I spent a year after I graduated just from my master's, just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I then basically got a job at SOAS University. I was a researcher at SOAS, and I used to organise the academic events and curate exhibitions for the Brunei Gallery. So I did that for roughly 8 years, and that was, in terms of what I did at SOAS, it was wonderful to begin with. I was, you know, they gave me my own office, and I thought, great. The only thing that was great about that wasn't the actual role, was the fact that I could fill my office with plants. So I was still doing things on the whim. That's just kind of my nature. And I found myself in a position that just gave me a wage every single month. You know, I had my head in my books. I was researching Korean history, and the kind of work that I did was, for example, I would be commissioned to spend 6 months looking at why a white vase travelled from one part of Korea to the other. And as fascinating as that might seem, practically within the research work, it was boring. And I did that. I was bored for 8 years, and I used to water my plants every day in the office thinking this can't be it. And art was always there in my life, so I would illustrate every single day. I was the person that was on the train that used to illustrate other people without asking for their permission. I'd look back at my sketches and think, oh God, that person probably didn't want me to sketch them. But at the end, I had sort of hundreds and thousands of illustrations of lots of strangers on trains, and I thought, I want to actually be able to do this full time. So by the grace of God, at the age of 29, I decided to pack everything in at SOAS, and I thought, right, I'm going to actually just take a career break and try and do this. You know, I know I'll probably be broke for a few months, and, you know, living in London, and, you know, just the lifestyle that I had was expensive because I was spending so much of my money on plants, books, music, and illustration products. So I was just thinking, right, how can I actually sustain the lifestyle that I have and do this full time? And so I quit the job, gave myself a year, and managed to get a studio. And I used to share a studio with a bunch of artists, and it was literally like hot desking, and that's where it all started. So I then became a full-time illustrator and an artist, and within a year of taking that career break, things kind of went well, and I started to get full paid commissions, and now this is my 9 to 5, and I do what I truly love. So I'm still on a whim, I'm still doing what I love, except it's now my full-time job. I have illustrators that I commission work to, and I do exciting things like interior design projects, things like I get asked to illustrate, you know, dinosaurs on a wall in some random restaurant somewhere in London, and it's great. It's what I enjoy doing. So Restless Beings, unlike everything else in my life, was one of the things that I actually didn't do because I loved it or it was exciting, or it was fun and colourful. I mean, everything else pretty much, you know, I've been playing with colouring pencils since I was born, so that was largely, you know, a big chunk of my life. But every time I would go back to Bangladesh during family trips, I would stop off at the Dhaka train station, and I would see street children. So initially it was something that I saw from the age of, I'd say, 7, 8 years old. I saw street children in Dhaka train stations, and they were collecting plastic bottles, they were selling, you know, all sorts of things. And I found it was more of a curiosity at first, which then in my early adult life became something which I felt was a human compulsion, which was I have to do something about these children. Every, you know, annual summer family vacation, I'm seeing these children. There must be more. I have this affinity with these children. And so by the time I graduated, I thought, right, you know, a bunch of us friends and my co-director, we all came together and thought, why don't we just have a blog where people can write about the things that actually they were passionate about? So initially Restless Beings was simply a blog. It was like a student vlog, a blog/vlog. So we had students submitting articles, short sort of journalists, established journalists, as well as university students across the world, just submitting articles about what made them restless. It could be anything from environmental issues to animal rights to human rights. And from that, within a couple of years, we went from sort of a couple of hundred readers to a couple of thousand readers to a couple of hundreds and thousands of readers. And then we started to have readers who then became supporters, who then started to send us emails and say, right, okay, it's great to talk about what makes you feel restless. And this was from the age of, say, 21 all the way up until the age of 23. So it was just a very short period when some of our readers started to email us and say, right, we need to make some tangible differences. How can we make a real difference for this community, or that community, or these animals, and this part of, you know, a land strip somewhere. And that's when Restless Beings was born. We registered as a regular NGO, and from then we've just grown, and it's been 10 years now as an officially registered organisation. When I say we are a volunteer-led organisation, so it's myself, my co-director, and I'd say 40 other team members in the UK, and we have team members across the world. So with Restless Beings, when we first started, it was initially, of course, a blog, and as the organisation grew, our readers became active supporters. And when active supporters want to do something more, they want to go out on the streets and protest, they want to raise money and make differences, they want to write about things in mainstream papers. And this started happening, and we saw that ripple happen, and we thought, how can we mobilise this so it's actually effective and not just an activist group that's doing something for the sake of doing it and being incredibly loud, which we were at the time. We were at the sort of forefront of every protest. We were speaking about so many different issues, and that was great. It was sort of early intersectionality, but we thought, how can we actually streamline this? Our mission statement had to be clear. And so when we registered as a British charity, as an organisation, we said, what is it that we actually stand for? I mean, it's fine for me to feel really affected by street children that I met in Bangladesh, but there are 400,000 plus street children in just Dhaka alone. That's not even the whole of Bangladesh. When you look at the rest of South Asia, when you look at cities like Delhi and Lahore, it grows on, and we're in the millions and billions. So one person or two people or a small group of people in London won't make a difference to that, but we can obviously contribute. So we thought at the time we need to have some sort of a clear underlying value system that we work by. So our mission statement became to voice the voiceless and the most silenced communities. So to work with the people who are on the margins of society and to look at ways in which we can raise awareness for them, push the media into wanting to write about them and talk about them, and then work towards advocacy and make a difference. And that's kind of where I think when Restless Beings became quite serious. And we started to research into our communities that we worked with. We looked at who was the most marginalised community. Was it a street child, or was it a street child that was also homeless, orphan, working in prostitution, had just been trafficked into Thailand, had worked in the sex trade and had been, had come home, and now no organisation wants to touch that child because it's the most unreachable child. We worked with those children. So we weren't working with any children that were sort of being supported already by large organisations or major NGOs. We were working at the underdogs of society. And from then on, we went from Bangladesh to working in Burma, to working in Central Asia, to working in parts of Kashmir in Africa. And we have tiny projects pretty much with the same value system across the world. And it's all voluntary led, because we follow the system of in order to make change, you don't need to do this full time as a job. It can just grow from human compulsion and a sense of sort of an obligation towards the rest of humanity. So Restless Beings is registered as not just a British charity, but we're also a completely open organisation. We're multifaceted, multicultural. So on our team, we have people from all different walks of life, from every single cultural community, age group, sexuality, absolutely everything. We work with the most marginalised communities. So we don't care about where you're from, what your religion is. We just care about why you got to where you got to and why you're struggling. And ultimately, we all bleed the same. It's all red. And if we can work towards supporting communities in need, then it shouldn't matter what faith system or which God they follow. It should be about whether they're okay. And that's the baseline of everything we do. And that's reflected in the community that we work for and also the team that we have. So in terms of funding, we've never applied for a funding application. Now, this year, for the first time after 10 years as an organisation, we're actually looking at funding because the organisation is bursting at its seams. And you can't go to the next stage of any organisation without thinking about growth and strategizing towards that. But for the last 10 years, we relied solely on public donations. We used to organise music gigs up and down the country, student gigs, all sorts of events, and just general public donations. Strangely enough, 99% of our donations come through social media. So we often refer to ourselves as an organisation. We have a small office in Myland. There's no one going in there 9 to 5, maybe in the next 10 years. But it's an office space that all our volunteers use for short meetings, for creative work, for creating protest banners or for writing to MPs. So it's a shared creative space as well. And aside from that, we have public donors online. So we often refer to ourselves as a social media born organisation that runs off the steam and of compassion on social media. And that's pretty much how we've been running. And all our projects, because they're so holistic, and what I mean by holistic is when we look at a child that's been trafficked and when we look at a woman who's a refugee, we look at all 360 degrees of their needs. And we don't take our Western values and impose it on that child or that woman. We look at what they need culturally, faith, everything that they need. Just as a woman, like, I need this month, I haven't received this, and I actually don't care about rice, and I don't actually need education, I actually need this. So we look at what is it, we do needs assessment, real valued needs assessments, and then we support them as best as we can through that, and we do that 100% through our public donations. And because we also get the gift aid, that's additional money, it just means that it's like 125% that goes towards our community. And we literally have no marketing costs. We don't print anything, everything's done online, so there's no cost there either. So there's a really sustainable solution that we've created, and so far, alhamdulillah, it's worked. We have a number of projects at Restless Beings working with marginalised communities. One of our larger projects is the Rohingya project, as well as the Street Children project in Bangladesh. My current projects right now are I'm working on a children's book illustration. So it's a story about a young girl identifying with herself all over again. And it's strange because it's quite close to maybe how I grew up. And I'm also looking at women's rights issues within the refugee camps, in the Rohingya refugee camps. I've just finished a project with a think tank, so I'm about to start another one which looks at dignity. And that's pretty much what I'm working on right now. So at Restless Beings, it's a voluntary-run organisation, so I don't get paid for what I do. How do I juggle all of this with my full-time paid job as an illustrator and as an artist? I don't. In all honesty, it's hard. I find ways to do it. So commutes are great. On my way to a client meeting for my illustration, I will get through about 10 emails for Restless Beings. When I'm home in the evenings, I'll get calls from Burma, and I might be doing that while I'm in the middle of making a curry, and that's okay. I'm on the phone to a Rohingya man who's on a boat, who's left his family. I bought him a phone, smuggled it into Burma. He's come out on a boat in the middle of the sea to call me for all of 1 minute to tell me what's going on in his village and which households got burnt down. The least I can do is pick up that call in the middle of making my mutton biryani and tell him, okay, cool, that's fine, I'm on it. And so that's how I juggle it. It's so involved in my life that I can't say that I have a 9 to 5 and then I have a few hours set aside. I don't. Restless Beings is intrinsic in everything that I do. So I could be, doing anything. I could be getting a haircut and I'll get a call and it's work. It's work 24 hours for me, and that's the only way I balance it. But every few months I take a few weeks out and I switch everything off. I've been really blessed to be nominated for several British Muslim awards, and I've been consecutively for 4 years listed on the British Bangladeshi Power 100 list. It's obviously wonderful, I can eat as much humble pie as I like, but it's great. Everyone likes to be listed on something because some sense of acknowledgement has happened. For me, though, the exciting thing and the reason why I say it's great, it's because as soon as I'm listed, the next thing is Restless Beings, and that means someone's going to go online and look at Restless Beings, read about the communities that I work with and that I serve, and maybe make a donation or maybe share it with someone. And for me, that ripple effect is what makes all of this okay and great. And that's why these kinds of things are so important. And every platform, we should celebrate them, and to be part of them is just such an honour. So it's wonderful for me. Being a British Muslim woman, for me, is quite an exciting space because I feel like it's changing all the time. And I genuinely feel that there's no one structure to be a Muslim woman. We can't be homogenized into one lump sum of this is what it means to be a British Muslim woman, therefore you adhere to those values. Because I think being a British Muslim woman is anything and absolutely everything. I think the one thing that we can share is one or two ideologies of the faith, the key fundamental things, the prophets we follow, the God we believe in, and certain practicing rituals. But those are the sort of fundamentals of our faith. But in terms of how, as a British Muslim woman, I express myself, how I am, what I identify myself with, what lifestyle path I've picked. It's so different. I have friends from all different walks of life, from all different faiths. And so for me, it's just an exciting space to actually be able to share who I am and my faith and my way of approaching my faith with those that are actually not from my faith. And that's what being a British Muslim woman is actually being able to stand up for your faith, but in the most interesting and developing and constantly changing way. And then it becomes something that's almost quite exciting for everyone else around you as well. So that's what it is for me, a changing narrative. I get asked all the time, how can I make a change? Because my life is so full. And one of the things I always say to everyone now, having done this for 10 years, having been part of Restless Beings, I'm still feeling young, still feeling like maybe I have another 20 years ahead of me, is that we are all change makers and game changers. We're able to do everything and anything. We shouldn't limit ourselves. Someone could say something to you and your next door neighbor, and you could say something wise to them, and that particular day that person might have had some identity crisis, and in some way what you said might have been poignant and made a change. So you're a change maker, or you might have helped thousands of people cross the border and made a political decision. You're also a change maker. A little birdie earlier on today said to me that there is no one formula for being a British Muslim woman, and I found that so interesting, and it kind of dispels so many myths, and it kind of changes the narrative for me as well. So I will see that as something that I will carry with me, and I might repeat that in another 10 years to a teenage girl who's trying to figure out whether she wants to get a tattoo or wear the headscarf, and that might help her shape her life at that moment. So we're all pivotal and we're all change makers, and there truly is no limit to this.